It was a Sunday afternoon in early spring, one of those days when the sunlight feels soft, like warm honey poured over everything. I had been in the kitchen, baking lemon bread, my late husband's favorite recipe, and the smell filled the whole house. The windows were cracked open, letting in a gentle breeze that carried the sound of children playing somewhere down the street. That's when I heard a knock on the door. Not the usual loud knock my daughter uses when she drops by, but a polite, uncertain tap. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened the door to see my grandson, Ethan, standing there with his hands shoved deep into his hoodie pockets. "Hi, Grandma," he said, looking down at the porch floor instead of me. "Ethan, what a surprise. Come in, sweetheart." He stepped inside, quiet and careful, glancing around like he was searching for something. I noticed the small tremor in his voice when he said, "Mom's in the car. I told her I wanted to talk to you. Alone." That word, alone, caught me off guard. Ethan had never been shy with me. We were close. He'd spent half his summers here, chasing fireflies and sneaking extra cookies when he thought I wasn't looking. But now, something was different. We sat at the kitchen table, the sunlight catching on the old lace tablecloth. I poured us both some sweet tea, and he fidgeted with the glass, tracing the condensation with his finger. "What's on your mind, honey?" I asked, keeping my voice soft. He took a deep breath. "Grandma, can I ask you something? And please don't tell Mom I did." My heart tightened a little. "You can tell me anything, Ethan. You know that." He nodded, eyes still on the glass. Then, after a pause long enough for me to hear the ticking clock on the wall, he whispered, "Do you ever miss Grandpa? Really miss him?" I didn't expect that. It hit me right in the chest. I'd spent years learning to talk about my husband's passing with gentle words, as if smoothing sharp edges so no one would get hurt. But Ethan's question broke right through all that quiet control. "Yes," I said softly, "every single day." He looked up then, and there was something in his eyes, something heavy, too grown for his age. "I think I know how that feels," he said. I reached out and placed my hand over his. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" His voice trembled. "My best friend, Lucas. He moved away last month. I didn't tell anyone, but it feels like I lost something I'll never get back." For a long moment, the only sound was the clock ticking and a bird calling outside. My throat tightened, not from sadness, but from a deep, aching tenderness. "Oh, Ethan," I said, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. "Loss doesn't only happen when someone dies. Sometimes it's just distance, but it can still hurt just as much." He leaned forward, resting his forehead against my arm. "I just don't want to forget him." I stroked his hair, the way I used to when he was little. "You won't forget. The people we love, they stay with us. Sometimes in memories, sometimes in little habits, sometimes just in the way we feel when the wind blows a certain way." He looked up, his eyes glassy but calm. "That's what I hoped you'd say." We sat there for a while, no more words needed. The afternoon light shifted, turning golden, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time. A quiet, peaceful warmth deep inside. It wasn't just about grief or love. It was about connection, the kind that stretches across generations and hearts. That day, my grandson taught me that love doesn't only pass down. Sometimes it reaches back up, wrapping around you when you least expect it. The next time Ethan came by, it was a Thursday evening. The sun was just setting behind the maple trees, painting the sky with strokes of pink and amber. I was sitting on the porch swing with my knitting when his mother's car pulled up. He waved from the passenger seat, and I could already tell something was on his mind again. His mom gave a small smile and a wave before driving off, leaving him standing at the end of the walkway, hands in his jacket pockets, just like last time. "Back so soon?" I teased gently as he climbed the steps. He grinned faintly. You make better sweet tea than Mom. Flattery will get you everywhere, I said, patting the seat beside me. Come sit. It's too nice an evening to waste indoors. He sat down, the swing creaking softly beneath our weight. For a while, we just listened to the crickets and the rustling leaves. The scent of lilacs drifted from the garden, mingling with the faint smoke of someone's barbecue down the street. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that only comes when you don't need to fill the silence. After a while, Ethan said quietly, "Grandma, do you ever feel like people expect you to be strong all the time?" His question caught me off guard again. "Why do you ask?" He shrugged, his eyes following a firefly blinking lazily in the dusk. "I don't know. Everyone keeps saying I'm handling things well, with Lucas moving, with school and stuff, but I'm not sure I am. I just don't want anyone to worry about me." I turned slightly toward him. "Oh, Ethan, I know that feeling better than you think." He glanced at me, curious. "When your grandfather passed," I said slowly, "everyone kept telling me how strong I was. They meant well, but it made me feel like I couldn't fall apart, even a little. So I smiled and said I was fine. But the truth? Some nights I'd sit right here on this porch and cry until the stars blurred." He was quiet, his expression softening. "You never told me that." I smiled sadly. "No, I didn't. I thought it would scare you. But now, maybe it's okay if you know. Being strong doesn't mean pretending you don't hurt. It means keeping your heart open, even when it aches." Ethan looked down at his shoes, then whispered, "Sometimes I miss Lucas so much it feels like my chest is too small." I nodded. That's love, sweetheart. The kind that doesn't fade just because someone isn't nearby. He sighed, leaning back on the swing. "I thought love was supposed to make you happy." I smiled at that, a soft, knowing smile. "It does eventually, but first, it teaches you how deep you can feel." The porch light flickered on as the sky deepened to a rich indigo. A cool breeze brushed past us, and I could smell the rain that would come later in the night. Ethan pulled his hood tighter, and I slipped my arm around his shoulder. He didn't resist. He just leaned into me like he used to when he was small. "You know," I said after a moment, "your grandfather used to tell me that the hardest part of love isn't saying goodbye. It's learning to keep living with the memories." Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. "Did it ever stop hurting?" "No," I said honestly. "But the hurt changed. It softened. It became something that reminded me I was lucky enough to have loved him that much." He nodded slowly, as if trying to tuck the thought somewhere safe. "Maybe that's how I'll think about Lucas." We sat there long after the last bit of light had gone, the night sounds wrapping around us. For a boy his age, he carried more depth than I could have imagined, and as I watched him stare into the darkening horizon, I realized something. This wasn't just about loss anymore. It was about understanding what it means to feel deeply, to care, to be vulnerable. Before he left that night, he turned at the gate and said, "Grandma, thanks for not trying to fix it. Just talking helps." I smiled and waved. "That's what grandmas are for, sweetheart." When he was gone, I sat back down on the porch swing. The chain creaked softly, and I thought about how life keeps circling. Joy and pain, endings and beginnings. And maybe, just maybe, this was one of those moments that would stay with him long after he was grown. A few weeks passed before Ethan came again. It was early summer now, the air thick with the smell of cut grass and blooming roses. The house always felt a little too quiet when no one was visiting, so I was delighted when I saw his bike tossed on the front lawn one afternoon. He didn't even knock this time, just walked right in, like he used to when he was little. "Grandma?" he called. "In here, sweetheart," I said from the kitchen. I was standing at the counter, rolling out dough for a peach pie. The radio was humming softly, playing one of those old songs that always takes me back to the early years with my husband. Ethan came in and leaned against the doorway. "Smells amazing," he said, eyes bright. "You always make pie when you're thinking about Grandpa, don't you?" I stopped mid-roll, surprised. "What makes you say that?" He shrugged, smiling a little. "You always tell stories about him when you bake. Mom says you two used to fight about who made the better crust." I laughed, a warm, unexpected sound that filled the kitchen. "She's right about that. He used to sneak extra butter into his just to prove a point." Ethan grinned. "Guess that's where I get my stubbornness." He sat at the table, and I noticed how tall he'd gotten. His voice was deeper now, but there was still a softness in his eyes. For a while, we just talked about little things. His summer plans, his favorite new songs, the math teacher he didn't like. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "Grandma, do you ever get scared of being alone?" The question hung there, fragile as glass. I took a slow breath. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I've learned that being alone doesn't always mean being lonely. There's a difference." He nodded, thoughtful. "I think I'm starting to get that. After Lucas moved, I spent so much time by myself. At first, I hated it. But now, sometimes I like it. I draw or ride my bike. I even started writing stuff." "Writing?" I said, smiling. "Well, now, that's something. What do you write?" "Mostly letters I'll never send," he said with a little shrug. "To Lucas, to myself, to Dad sometimes." My hands paused on the dough again. His dad, my son-in-law, had left when Ethan was just a toddler. It wasn't something we talked about much. "Do you want to tell me what you write to him?" I asked gently. Ethan looked down at his hands, turning a bracelet around his wrist. "Sometimes I just tell him what he missed. Like when I made the soccer team, or when Mom got that new job. But mostly, I ask him why he didn't stay." His voice broke just a little at the end, and it went straight to my heart. I put the rolling pin down and went to him, wiping my hands on my apron before resting one on his shoulder. "Oh, Ethan," I whispered, "there are some questions that never really get answered, but you asking them, that means your heart is open, and that's a brave thing to be." He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "I just don't want to be like him." I knelt beside him then, taking both his hands in mine. "You won't be," I said firmly. "You already aren't. You're showing up. You're feeling, talking, caring. That's what makes a man different. Not running from pain, but learning from it." He met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw something new in his, a steadiness, a quiet strength forming there. "You always know what to say," he murmured. I smiled softly, "only because I've lived through the things I'm saying." We finished the pie together after that, laughing when he spilled flour all over the counter. When it came out of the oven, golden and bubbling, we sat side by side at the table and ate warm slices straight from the dish. Between bites, Ethan said, "I think I'm going to write something different tonight. Not a letter, more like a promise, to keep trying to be better, to love people hard, even if it hurts." My chest swelled with pride. "That's a beautiful promise," I said. "One your grandfather would have been proud of too." He smiled, and I could see the boy he had been and the man he was becoming, both living inside him, side by side. As he got up to leave, he gave me a quick hug. It wasn't long or dramatic, just real, full of quiet gratitude. And when the door closed behind him, the house didn't feel so empty anymore. The smell of peaches lingered in the air, sweet and warm, and I realized something. Love doesn't fade when people leave. It just changes shape, sometimes into memory, sometimes into hope, and sometimes into the steady heartbeat of someone you helped shape. It was late August when everything came full circle. The days had grown shorter, and the evenings carried that faint crispness that hints at fall. I'd been out in the garden, cutting back the last of the summer roses, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Need some help, Grandma?" I turned to see Ethan standing at the gate, taller now, his hair a little longer, the easy smile of a boy giving way to the quiet confidence of someone on the edge of growing up. "Well, look who's here," I said, brushing dirt from my gloves. "You sure you know what you're offering? These roses bite back." He laughed. "I'll risk it." He grabbed the shears from the fence post, and together we worked in the gentle afternoon light. We didn't talk much at first, just the snip of stems, the rustle of leaves, and the distant hum of a neighbor's mower. It felt peaceful, like the kind of silence you share with someone who truly understands you. After a while, he said, "Grandma, I think I finally get what you meant about love changing shape." I looked over at him, curious. "Oh, what brought that on?" He smiled, a little shyly. "Remember Lucas? We still text sometimes. Not as much as we used to, but when we do, it feels good. Not sad anymore. Just thankful. I guess I finally stopped missing him the way I used to." "That's a beautiful thing, Ethan," I said softly. "It means you've carried the best parts with you." He nodded, then hesitated before adding, "And I wrote something. For school. It's supposed to be a personal essay. I wrote about you." I froze for a second, caught off guard. "About me?" He grinned. "Well, kind of. About that first day I came over to talk. I didn't say everything, but I told the story of how you taught me that love isn't just about who stays. It's about how we keep loving, even when they're gone." I felt my throat tighten, the world blurring for just a moment. "Oh, Ethan," I whispered, "you have no idea how much that means to me." He reached over, brushing a leaf from my shoulder. "I do, Grandma. You helped me figure out how to feel things without being scared of them. I think. You helped me grow up." There it was, the moment that melted me completely. All the words, all the quiet evenings on the porch, all the small talks that seemed simple but weren't, they'd led to this, to him finding his heart. I set my gloves down and wrapped my arms around him. For a long moment, we just stood there, surrounded by the scent of roses and earth and sun. I could feel his heartbeat against mine, steady and sure. "You've grown into someone your grandfather would have been proud of," I said finally. He hugged me tighter. "You think so?" "I know so," I said, "because I am too." We carried the cut flowers inside and set them in a vase by the window. The evening light poured through, turning the petals golden. Ethan sat at the table, looking around the kitchen, at the old photos, the clock, the lemon bread cooling on the counter. "This house feels like it remembers everything," he said quietly. I smiled. "It does. Every laugh, every tear, every promise, just like people do." He nodded thoughtfully, then added, "When I go off to college someday, I hope I can take some of that with me." "You will," I said, "not in boxes or bags, but in your heart." The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the floor. We had dinner together, just soup and bread, simple and comforting, and talked about his dreams, his plans, the world waiting for him. I listened, proud and a little wistful, realizing that the boy who once came to me with tears in his eyes was becoming a young man ready to face life head-on. When he finally stood to leave, he gave me that same smile, the one that always managed to tug at my heart. "I'll come by next week," he said, opening the door. "Maybe we can bake another pie." "I'll have the peaches ready," I said, waving as he stepped out into the fading light. As the door closed, I looked around the quiet kitchen. The vase of roses caught the last bit of sunlight, glowing softly. I sat there for a long moment, letting the warmth fill me. That day, I realized something I hadn't before. Love doesn't just pass through generations, it grows richer with each one. Ethan had come to me for answers, but in giving him mine, I'd found something, too, a reminder that no matter how much time passes, connection is what keeps us alive inside. And so, as the evening settled in and the crickets began to sing, I whispered to the empty room, "Thank you, Ethan. You reminded me that love never really leaves. It just finds new voices to speak through." Then I smiled, feeling my heart lighter than it had been in years, knowing that somewhere out there, my grandson was carrying a little bit of that love forward, into a world that needed it just as much as I once did.